When I was a child, my grandmother told me, unlike the sun and the moon, the North Star never moves. So what does it do, I asked. Well, she said, it hangs around all night like a poet, drinking in the darkness, making its own light for the joy of others, like you and me.
So I once heard somewhere or read somewhere that words are thoughts half murdered. But I think there's a couple of shining exceptions to that in the studio here. Joining me today are Molly McNulty, who's the Executive Director of the Skagit River Poetry Foundation, and Tony Curtis. And if you don't mind me reading here, you're an accomplished writer, poet, experienced facilitator of creative writing workshops with both adults and children, and you're also a regular contributor to the Clifton Arts Festival.
Yes, that's right, John. See that long list, John? That means I'm old. Yeah. Yeah. I've done a lot of things over the last while. Yeah, some I'm not proud of, but others, yeah.
So just to get things going, because I'm a bit of a poetic philistine. I mean, I never really progressed beyond limericks. So if it's okay, I did come across one of your poems, and I was wondering if you could actually recite that, because I think it'd be a really nice segue into talking about poetry and your relationship with it.
Yeah, it was funny because when I met you, you said, will you read the last poem in your book? And it isn't the last poem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the last poem, and then I'll segue into the poem you want to discuss.
Okay,
because I'm a very superstitious poet. And when you said read the last poem, well, read the last poem. So this is a poem called When I Was a Child. The last poem in the book. When I was a child, my grandmother told me, unlike the sun and the moon, the North Star never moves. So what does it do, I asked. Well, she said, it hangs around all night like a poet, drinking in the darkness, making its own light for the joy of others, like you and me. And that poem was just written on the back in pencil to please my mother, who was going to read this manuscript full of filth.
And her response?
Well, that's a lovely poem. there's no sex or death in it. So the poem we want to discuss, to segue into, is called Fair Weather. And it just sets the question, do poets ever reach their destination? And this poem, it's actually appropriate to read it here, because I wrote it not in Port Townsend, but in the other side of Port Townsend. And it was my 60th birthday, and or a day or two before my 60th birthday. And I was thinking to myself,
it's time to reflect.
It's time to reflect, so you're near the end. And I was looking at the boat going back and forth, and I says to myself, that's my life, that old tanker, going back and forth, going from poem to poem, poem to poem, like an old ship going from harbour to harbour. And when I look back, will my life just be measured out in, not in coffee spoons, but in poems? So I wrote this poem. Do you want me to read this now, John?
If you would, that'd be great, thanks.
So this is called Fair Weather. Do poets ever reach their destination? I ask, not because I think they are like country buses, though their minds are often overcrowded, and they do tend to take the long way round. I ask because any I've ever met have been uneasy, watchful, just arrived or just about to leave, restless as the postman on his bicycle. In truth, I was thinking of ships, rusted old cargo ships, especially those you see late at night out beyond the bay, their light fading, their cargo a mystery, their destination unknown, too late, alas, to wish the captain fair weather. Last week at the end of the pier, I hailed a sailor. Welcome home. Ah no, he said. We docked last night, we're heading out. The end of a voyage is the beginning of a voyage. I wished him fair weather. As I watched his frail craft batter the wind, I thought, it's the same for poets. The end of a poem is the beginning of a poem. And so I ask again, do poets ever reach their destination?
Beautiful.
And here I am, now 7 years later, And I still, like, I'm an even leakier old cargo ship.
And you're still pondering that
And
question.
I'm still pondering the question. And, yeah.
So Molly, can I turn to you and ask you about your part in all of this? I mean, you're the reason that, or one of the main reasons that Tony's come across for the event. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Oh yeah, this is going to be a wonderful event, and it was inspired by this book by Tony, Folk, and we wanted to really honor the legacy of the various cultures and peoples from this valley. So we titled it Folk, Fishers, Farmers, and Foresters. And we're looking at all of the folks who have come into our valley, not just in the last 300 or 400 years to make it the rich valley that it is, but also honoring the people who came way before us, 1,000 years before. So this is an event that will be at Bertelsen Winery. It's a fundraiser. It's an educational opportunity for our people who come to find out more about the foundation, about what we do, putting people like Tony Curtis into classrooms and other folks, and it's a way that we are going to, one, educate people about what we do, and also give them some entertainment. There'll be music and poetry and kids and lots of really good food, and anyway, it's this Saturday, the 14th. So come join us.
It's around the corner. Huh?
Yeah, it is. So
can we just dwell on poetry? And you work with kids.
I work with kids, and they're the funniest audience. When a little fellow comes up to you and says, "Sir, your poem is brutal," he's honest, and I love that. And when the children like a poem, the energy of them is fantastic. I do poems like Tree V. It's a big long poem, but it starts off, "The whole world is watching TV, but me, I'm watching a tree." There's rarely anything good on TV. There's fantastic things on Tree V. Last night I watched an owl on Tree V. Little white feathers, big brown eyes, and every time it said, "Doo doo," what a surprise. That goes on, then rolls on. And I can make little poems for children, or big poems, somebody really clever invented Saturday and Sunday, but somebody really stupid invented Monday. And all the kids go, "Yeah!" I once read in the Methodist old folks home in Tacoma, right? And I started off, this woman introduced me, like you introduced me, and this woman introduced me, and then I started off, because it was an old folks home full of people, close to 100. I said, I'll do a poem about a man I heard on the radio, and the man was 100. And the presenter says to him, "Well, George, how did you get to be 100? And I thought the man would say broccoli or rice cakes or no sex, no cigarettes, no drink. But he didn't. What he said was so beautiful. I wrote it down. "Well, George, how did you get to be 100? I met her when she was 17. She sang in the choir, one of those voices close to angels. She was always younger than me. A small, beautiful woman. She turned heads on the street, my heart on the pillow. Dead 7 years now, 7 dead years. I put this long life down to taking time to make and drink, love and tea." And then the woman in the old folks' home said, she turned to me, the woman introduced me, and says, "I'm 103. It's lovely to hear a poem about a younger man."
So poetry really seems to be therapy as much as...
Well, no, they say about poetry that it's not a career. It's not. It's more of a disease, an affliction, a condition. Like I've always written poetry since I was this high. I've always been interested in words, and I think there is some kind of born quality in a poet.
But it seems to me that it's almost like alchemy, because what you do is you take observations of some of the simplest aspects of life and turn it into something that's just quite golden.
I think that's the best of poetry, to do that, is to take something that is so
almost
familiar,
mundane,
and turn it into the magic.
It's fun, yeah.
It is.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up, other than one last plug for people to come down?
Just that we are so excited to have Tony actually
Yeah.
be here. And he gets to be in schools for just a limited amount of time.
But still, it's a bad month. Some schools are heading into exams. The little people, they can have me anytime. For me, personally, it's extraordinary not to have glass between us, whether it's a glass screen or a perspex screen.
Yeah, yeah.
I was on the RT radio recently, and when I went to be interviewed by the woman, it was like meeting a friend in prison. You know, when she sat the other side of the plastic, I felt like, where's the phone, you know? Because I've seen this is how you do it, you know.
Yeah, well, like, where's the phone?
She's on the 20.
Right.
Yeah.
It is strange trying to reacclimatise
Yeah, it is. It is.
to the new normal, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But, wonderful meeting you and
nice to meet you,
listening
John.
to some of your philosophy and art.
Well, you're from a country here with such great poets that you'll have no problem finding fantastic poetry in this country.
Molly, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Tony, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.